This is basically a very simple way to kind of rig your character. It's not the proper way that we're going to use uh, because we're going to use an auto rigger called Rapid Rig Basic or Advanced. Either one is going to work for you. But yeah, so these rigging sort of pieces of software are going to lay in joints that we can move around and animate nicely on our characters. So to set up our file for that, if you open up your own mesh character, the first step that you're going to need to do is just go in and mesh combine everything. Unless you have a specific thing that is going to be sitting on top of it. Like I know sometimes when you're doing cloth sims, you have that maintain that like if you had like a dress or something, you'd have that remain as a separate object. But for this class, I'm pretty sure everyone's just going to be doing this and just drag selecting over everything. And you're just going to go to mesh and combine. And I don't like that the pivot point is all the way back there from that mesh combine. So what I'm going to do is hold D to move around that pivot point, and I'm going to hold X to snap it to the grid somewhere. And I'm going to try to align that to world 0 right over here. So I'm just holding D and X, and we're snapping that. And that's pretty much centered. Let me make sure it's centered on X as well. There we go, perfect. So everything's just been mesh combined. And you'll see that there's this node in here that has a bunch of transform history on it. So the next step in order to get a clean scene for rigging is we go into edit, delete all by type and history, and notice how that just went away in my hierarchy in that outliner. So those nodes, if you try to just go in and delete them with like by clicking them and then just hitting the delete key, it would mess up your scene because you'd be messing with like some history in that file, and then like parts of your mesh would be changed. So we don't want that. So you just delete all by type history, and then you might also notice that your character or your mesh would be under a group. So if I just press Control G, I can simulate that for you right there. So see how it made that group above that object. So now if I rotate this around, this parent group is rotating this child object around it. And we don't want that. We want that mesh to be just on the top level, not under any sort of groups or anything. So in order to get something out of a group, you select that object, and then you press Shift P. And you'll see that it's outside of there now. The opposite of that is parenting, right? So if we wanted it to be under that object, you would just do click one, and then click select the other, and then press P. So you always select child and then parent, and then it would parent another. But we don't want that, so we're doing Shift P. And we can just go in, delete that group. And so now we have a clean file ready for rigging with Grandma. And if we go in and what we're going to do is change our menu set over to rigging. Oh yeah, guys, we're in a whole new frontier now. All these buttons are different after Windows. We don't have mesh. We don't have mesh like edit mesh. We don't have mesh tools. We don't have mesh display. None of that. So we're going to be using this skeleton menu. And you can see there's a lot of different like create joints and stuff. And you can go in and like on one of these side views, you can go in. This is how you would just from like ground zero, like rig something up. You would go in and create those joints. You see how they're kind of moving around. Like I set it at the hip, and then one at the knee, and then there'd be another one going into the rest of the foot. But yeah, so you need to have this kind of skeletal structure in there, but for all the joints in the body. Now, we won't have as many spine joints as we do in real life. We won't have as many neck joints as we do in real life because we're dealing with some like a simplified version of it, right? But our goal with this, so that's the entire leg, kind of, pretty much. So it would go in here. You would line it up with the other view manually. But the auto rig basically takes care of this step for us, kind of. We still have to go in and do some manual placement of stuff, but I just wanted to show you the premise of rigging. So once you have those controls in there, and I can turn on, let's see, where is it? View shading, X-ray joints. So now I'll see those joints on top of everything. The next step in the rigging pipeline would be to create a NURBS primitive, like a circle. And then you would have it aligned to that joint, and then you'd have another one aligned to the next joint. I just Command D to duplicate it, and then I moved it in. I'm snapping it by holding V. And then you basically line up, so you'll have two hierarchies, right? You'll have your joint hierarchy, which is like this in here. And then your control hierarchy would be looking like this. So if I press P right there, I'm just doing child and then parent, right there, right there. And then you would have, so now when I move that around, it's basically mirroring that skeleton, right? And this is, keep in mind, this is just an introduction to like what rigs are. I don't want you guys to like really do this exactly. But yeah, so the next step would be having each of these drive those joints. So if you go into the driver, like think of this as the driver, then the driven, we're going to do something called constraining. So we're going to do a constraint. So now, let's see, hopefully that worked. It's not displaying as it normally does. Yeah, so now my NURB curve, that NURB circle is controlling that joint. And then we're going to do the same for each subsequent joint in there. Very nice. So now, there you go. Now it's rotating all of those, right? So the NURB is basically what you end up as an animator controlling, right? So now if I add this skeleton to a reference layer, so I just added it right here with that button in the channel box, and then converted it to a reference layer. So now I can no longer click on the skeleton, which you won't want to do. You can select it in the outliner, but in, let me add the mesh to display layer as well. Notice how I can't select them in the viewport, because as an animator, what you want to do is you open the scene, and then you'll see a bunch of NURB controllers, and then you'll be posing that around and moving the character. And I'm going to change my rotation. Notice how if I rotated it now, it's going to be like breaking the leg, basically. So usually when you're dealing with rotations like this, I go into object mode, and you access that by holding E, and then holding left click over it, and going to object mode. So now see how that axis aligns with the knee a lot better. So I can go in and kind of align that better. So these NURBS are intended to be the interface that the animator will use to push and pull on that skeleton, right? But yeah, so that's the rig, and I'm going to show you the tool that generates a nice human skeleton for us in Maya, and it's very, very simple. And let me delete all these joints out of there. So we have grandma ready to be rigged. Wait a minute, let me make her not a reference anymore. All right, so basically we need that skeleton for the leg and the NURBS curves hierarchy for the leg, but we want that to be the same across the entire body. So we want to have like at least like 3 spine joints going up, maybe 2. Grandma's got a pretty tiny spine. And like a neck joint as well as a head joint, the shoulders, the arms. So you need all those in there, and you need NURB control, or just controllers in general to control each one. So the fast, fun tool to do this with is called Quick Rig in here. It's under skeleton, And remember that's under your rigging menu. So we're not in modeling anymore. Notice how modeling is like this. In your rigging menu, under skeleton, open up quick rig. And you know what? Let's do some wacky stuff. So let me save scene as grandma quick rig. Here, continue. And it has this one-click option that will, in one click, rig the entire character, right? And that's amazing. So let's do that. Quick rig, I'm gonna click this little plus button to make a quick rig character. And all you have to do is select character meshes and then click auto rig. Hell yeah. All right, so it's gonna be thinking for a little bit. It's doing some calculations. And right now it's trying to think of where to place those joints and where to place the controls for those joints and how to bind that to our mesh. Because remember when I was moving around that skeleton, it wasn't really moving the leg of the character. And there we go. So we got an arm that is moving the character mesh around. The face is not holding up so well. And notice how the quick rig also put the hips pretty much at above the sternum. And so if you try to move this around, grandma's legs aren't going to be looking too good. In fact, her knee is basically at the pelvis. Yeah, exactly. Grandma, no. Grandma, please. Things aren't looking too good for grandma. So that's the one-step rig, right? But like it's pretty cool that it can even kind of do that. Can we get this file? I mean, you can do it to your own character right now. Like that's what I'm saying. Like you can just straight up open up the thing, clean it up, delete all the stuff that isn't the mesh in there, and then press the auto rig, and then you'll get similar effects. So I don't want that though, because as you saw, it's you know, a little bit broken. So also notice how Control Z is not working to remove it completely. Wait a minute. Wait 1 second. Oh. All right. So apparently. All right. So Maya just crashed. I was gonna say Maya doesn't like when you try to undo rig creation, but Maya made that very apparent to us all right there. So if we go in and start up a new Maya, yeah, definitely F's in the chat for that copy of Maya. Oh yeah. So let me pop this one open again. So oh my god. No. All right, there we go. Let's go. Let's try out recent files. Okay, grandma's lost to time. I'm gonna open up a scene. Sorry, characters, NPCs, grandma. I did save before I did that. Remember, I saved it as grandma quick rig. So we're set up. We're set up. We got that clean file. And please, guys, from this point on, please file save as every single time that you save, because we're going to be doing a lot of stuff on these characters and a lot of things can go wrong. So you need to have those incremental saves ready to go. But yeah, so we're back to the start. I'm going to change my menu over to rigging again, and then I'm going to go to skeleton, quick rig. Instead of doing the one click, we're going to do step by step. And you'll see that we get a lot better results this way. And my first step is going to be to add a character. So I made quick rig character. I can always rename that right here. We should do grandma. Grandma, right there, perfect. And then it wants to add geometry to this menu. So select your grandma mesh and then add it right there. Polysurface 14 shape. Probably should have chose a more, you know, reasonable name, but that's fine. Imperfect mesh, we can leave it on that. It has a bunch of other different settings, but including polygonal soup. Delicious. Well done. Nice, Maya. Then I'm going to create guides. And so it's going to use kind of some internal math. Hopefully it doesn't crash because it's going slow again. Maya, please. Oh no. Chef's kiss. There we go. All right, so after some thanking, it finally spat out some nice little points for us. So now you might be wondering like what these points are, but you might be able to kind of piece that together with what I just showed you when I was creating that lake. So this is basically going to be where that joint is in the hierarchy, or in relation to the mesh when it generates that hierarchy for the skeleton. And if you click on each node, you can see exactly what it's named. So hips right here. Notice how it put the hips up near like the chest again. I don't know why Maya wants to do that for this particular model, but it is. I see someone just drew on Zoom for me. Very nice. Very nice. So what you can do is kind of position these hips where they would be in real life. And it might be useful to go into wireframe so you can kind of see through the model and kind of examine. Yeah, everyone's able to see that one. But yeah, and then you'll basically piece by piece go in and just place where these joints are. So this is left upper leg. So this is like your hip, even though this was called hip right here. This is going to control the actual upper part of the leg. So it will functionally be where the hip joint is. So let's move it into approximately that right area. And then I'm going to move it a little bit forward. Now, when you're placing these joints for the leg, always have them be straight down. So I'm going to hold V and align these on left and right to that hip joint. And then I'm going to use V on this bottom ankle joint and align it left and right to that ankle. And you'll notice that if you don't do that, when you generate your skeleton, you're going to get some weird bending of some of the controls, especially when we use the different auto rig. But yeah, so I'm going to place that in the toe, and I'm just going to keep going throughout the rest of the object. So this is spine one, the first spine. This is the second one, even though it says spine one. Spine two, so it's spine one, and spine two. So let's put that basically kind of center of mass on the object. And this is how you're going to be placing the joints in your final model as well. Whoops. Grab the wrong one. Spine one, spine two. All right, all right. And let's see, left shoulder. So this is going to be basically the kind of like the clavicle area. And I always like to place the clav like kind of closer to the middle. I know like it's kind of hard to explain where the clav is, right? And on this like fake 3D object that doesn't actually have all the bones in like the shoulder area. But it's a close enough approximation. And then the same rules go for these arm joints, right? So always align them to be straight. You don't want to have that elbow bend in the wrong direction. Like our elbows don't really bend in terms of like our elbows can't like bend like that without rotating the rest of this stuff. So we don't want to throw off our model and have like a not very straight line between our shoulder and elbow. So I'm just going to line it up in there. I'm holding V and I'm just dragging on the right, on the correct axis for this forearm. That's going to go at the elbow. And notice how each of these joints is named, like this is left hand, but we're going to put that at the wrist. That's because the hand is going to orbit around this kind of location, right? So we need to every single object will have the next kind of, like this is the shoulder joint, right? But it has the arm in its slot because it's going to be controlling the arm. Sorry about that, I just fumbled over my words. But yeah, so let's put that in there and make sure that they're all aligned on the y-axis. That looks good. That looks good. And then I kind of want to move these all a little bit up to align with the hand. And let's go place in this joint, the neck. And notice how I'm also only doing one side. Like I'm not worrying about this other side, and that's because we can just mirror the controls over. And so I'm putting the neck kind of at the base of the head right there. Let's get it at the base of the skull. Make sure you don't go off center with this. Like keep these middle ones, like the spine and stuff, perfectly on the middle of the object. And we can also get this head joint in there. Head is a little bit deceiving because in this case it kind of means the tip of the head. All right, and then let's select all, or I might be getting my auto rigs messed up. I know the one we'll be using has a head tip. You know what? I'm gonna be conservative, and I'm just gonna move this neck one down and this head one to be at the base of the head, just in case. Right here. All right. So now we need to mirror it over, right? Because these legs aren't completely aligned. Like this is the right upper leg. Like, nah, that ain't gonna fly. So drag select over all of those bad boys. And then you can click this button to align. It basically mirrors it. Like if you're looking at your character, it mirrors this gray side to the blue unaltered side right there. So that's what that little arrow means. So it's mirroring from this side over to that side. And then can the hair have it too? Can the hair have it too? What exactly do you mean? You mean like can it have joints in it as well? To make it, yeah. So basically, the reason I'm showing you this is to, like, just to introduce the concepts of rigging to you guys. But when we go through and make it for real, we're going to be using an auto rig that's easier to set up additional joints on it. So what you have to do, well, let me get a little bit further because that's a little bit ahead of where I am right now. But yeah, so skeleton control rig, mirrored behavior. Yeah. So we're going to create the control rig now. I'm also going to save as. I'm going to do quick rig 2 to save where our progress on getting those points in that to match like all the anatomy of the character. And let's create. And there you go. So now we have a controllable skeleton in there. And then the last step is to just skin it to the object. So I'm not sure if it doesn't say whether or not you have to select your geometry. I doubt you do because you already put it in there, but I'm going to select your geometry anyways because the normal workflow is to select all your joints and then shift select your mesh and then click skin. And here we go. Let's turn on all that. And you can start playing and rotating around your character. Notice how it's pulling on the head. And that's because this joint has some influence over the verts on the head. And that goes for basically every single piece of this skeleton. Like so, let me turn off. Turn off X-ray joints. Yeah. So you can see the deformation a little bit better. But yeah, so this is super sick. This is like, it's one of the more painful parts of the pipeline, as you guys will find out when you start doing skinning. But it's also like amazing because like this is when you start being able to like animate your actual character. You can select all these controls and pose them around. Unfortunately, yeah, Grandma's head is getting stretched by that. But that's just going to be fixed in skinning once we skin these joints. Yeah, to see those skin weights, because you keep hearing me talk about the skin, like how it's skinned. So if you go to click your mesh and then paint skin weights, you can see. Wait, let me open up my tool settings. You can see all of like the different joints in the hierarchy, and you can see like exactly how much influence they have over the character. So you see how that, like this gradient, this white and black gradient, that's how much that right upper leg is going to move those points. So for a point that's super white, like completely like zero value white, it's going to move that to like max. Like it's going to move 1-to-1 with that joint. And so you'll notice that's why there's like this fall off in between the in between each joint, because this like midpoint of the knee is going to be kind of pulled on by this joint a little bit, and it's going to be rotated by this one as well, you know, just because it's going to stretch and bend like that. But yeah, so like I said, it's going to be a pretty painful part of the course, but like, oh my gosh, like just to be able to see this character that we brought from basically nothing to being a fully moving thing is super dope to me. And we'll be using a different auto rig software, so just keep that in mind. Because, well, the reason why we're using a different one is, notice how you can't, like, you don't have fingers on here. Like you can add them in later, or you can add them in during the process, but it's not as clean as the it's not a clean process like step by step.